Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We've come to our last segment. Let me repeat my invitations. Keep up with everything at Tarpley.net. Follow the Twitter feed at Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter. Look for those film clips from Press TV of Iran and Russia Today, RT. And remember, people who have these language abilities, if you have any of the leading world languages and you could give volunteer time for a couple of hours to translate some news articles. I'm thinking of something in the 1,000-word range, 1,200-word range, a news article on the current international situation, particularly in regard to Libya, Yemen. Please do come forward. You can contact me through the contact feature at tarpley.net. And if you are in touch with some reality of struggle that is not getting attention, especially in this critical area of the American Middle West, do send in. You can also just send in news reports, and I can put them on the air if you don't want to come on yourself, and we can work on that. But now, program. You can't win these struggles without a program. It's not enough to say, please don't crucify us. You've got to have the answer. You can say, Wall Street should pay. Great. How should Wall Street pay? How do you do that? Is the best way to do it a surtax on millionaires? Well, surtax on millionaires is fine, but that's not the really big money. And we had a very interesting contribution last week from Dan Abramson, who was telling us that the volume of the turnover, the buying and selling, changing hands, right, the daily proceeds, $4 quadrillion totally untaxed. And the state of New York not using their own tax. So let's give the floor to Dan Abramson. Dan, take it from here to the end of the show and give us your report on the New York State business, I think was number one, right?
All right, Webster, and thanks for having me again. Anyone who wants to follow this, I'm also on Twitter, twitter.com/falseflagnews, or get at me, falseflagnews@gmail.com. Webster, let me get right into it. It's funny, right here I had written, it's not just enough to say preserve our union, save our social programs. We need a comprehensive plan. So you and I are definitely on the same page here. Let me start with this New York State sales tax on stock transfers. If you and try to buy food or clothing, anything. It's certainly in the state of Texas here, you pay 6% sales tax. What we look at with the derivatives and stock trades in New York, there is 4 quadrillion, 3.7 quadrillion to be exact, in turnover annually that is going untaxed. I wanted to continue talking about this sales tax on stock transfers. This is New York State Tax Law 270. This was supposed to generate this year $16 billion in revenue. Unfortunately, in 1979, 1981, and 1987, the governor and the state legislature passed exemptions for Wall Street to basically file a rebate form so that every time that they were supposed to get taxed, these billions of dollars in the aggregate, they were able to just get it given right back to them. Why was this done? Well, they claimed if we institute this tax, they will run off to New Jersey. And this tax had been up for close to 20 years, and very few firms had run anywhere close to New Jersey. You still had the big 5 banks right there in New York. So this is very much a phantom menace they proposed, and they have since not been collecting this tax. Now, in fact, the governor before Cuomo was asked, why aren't you collecting this tax? He said, we are afraid that they're going to run off to New Jersey. That's what Governor Patterson said. So I'm actually looking into a lawsuit against the state of New York because even though they're exempting these firms, there are still details within this new Section 280 that I think are being violated right now. So I want to give people a little bit of hope that I think that there's room to push for this tax to be collected. I want to go on and talk about how this is relevant to the greater struggle here. Webster, I'm sure you talked about how this week Governor Kasich pushed this bill that is in many ways more regressive, more draconian, more harsh in its austerity toward union busting, cuts in Medicaid, cuts in education, all to pay for property and income tax reductions for the wealthiest 1%. One way to respond to this is with recalls and referendums and public protests, but we need a comprehensive way to attack this because people are going to say, how are you going to get the money? We need to get the money from derivatives. And let me make it very simple here. 3.7 quadrillion in annual turnover is going untaxed you are paying the sales tax. What we're seeing in the states right now is very much a canary in the coal mine for what's coming. If you saw the Simpson-Bowles Commission that Obama helped promote, what we're going to see next are cuts and attacks on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, WIC, and you can already see this budget that Obama has proposed. You're seeing cuts in the EPA, cuts to poor families, cuts in funding for health care for the poor. That is where it's going next. So if you don't have a comprehensive plan for raising revenue, you're not part of the game right now. Now, why do we tax derivatives? All they are is speculative finance.
Dan, you're breaking up. We're having technical difficulties. Let's see if we can continue. I think we've lost Dan. Anyway, you heard it, right? These were the main points. We're told by these reactionary governments, let's not forget Snyder in Michigan, a particularly odious one who's very open to taxing working people. They just don't have the money, so you have to be crucified. Well, dear friends, we're talking collective sacrifice, equality of sacrifice, shared sacrifice. Wall Street should sacrifice almost 4,000 trillion of derivatives turnover, and completely untaxed. And the ever-loving state of New York, with the Democrat governor Cuomo of a family dynasty, is continuing this bankrupt and, as Dan says, probably illegal policy of rebating New York State Law 270, which is the turnover tax, and it's a very nominal one. It's much smaller than the 1% Wall Street sales tax that we've talked about. He has rebated that, and that's something between $15 and $20 billion a year, more than enough, even at that tiny, low level of taxation. It's something like 1/10 or 2/10 of 1%. It's far less than the full 1% Wall Street sales tax that we're advocating here. You could solve the New York State budget crisis with one fell swoop. And remember, the way it should work is a federal, national Wall Street sales tax on all derivatives, that is to say, over-the-counter derivatives, be they credit default swaps, if those are still legal, they shouldn't be, the other kinds of derivatives, the collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, super CDOs, on all of those, plus the exchange-traded derivatives, the futures, the options, the indices, all the combinations of those, plus the stocks, the bonds, and any other kinds of paper crossing the wire, right, as they are exchanged. So it's not a tax on profits. We just learned this week that Immelt of GE, General Electric, which is basically a hedge fund and not an industrial corporation at all, paid zero taxes and actually got a $3 billion rebate from the government due to Immelt's sweetheart relationship with Obama. One thing is to say, let's have a serious corporate income tax. But again, the big money, and I'm stressing this, the biggest cash flow, the biggest flow of at least paper wealth. It's really not wealth, but this is the way in our society that we can transfer resources from one place to another. This 3.7 quadrillion of turnover, which amounts at any given time to about 1.5 quadrillion of derivatives, but since they change hands incessantly, the turnover is much bigger. It's about 3 times the amount. So 4 quadrillion, well, if it's a 1% tax, that's 40 trillion. $40 trillion. Now, obviously, once you have the tax, the speculation would abate. It would go down. But just keep the 4 quadrillion. It would be a $40 trillion tax benefit. 20 trillion could stay with the federal government. We could fund everything well into the 22nd century. And there would be 20 trillion for the states, which would obviously solve all of the problems. We could begin to give people a peace dividend, a means of replenishing the exhausted, looted situation of the American people after a decline in our standard of living of 2/3, minus 65 to 70% since the end of the Lyndon Johnson administration. That's what a Tobin tax, a Wall Street sales tax, could do. So write that at the top of your banner, not just don't crucify us, save our union. Make Wall Street pay. How? With a Wall Street sales tax, 1% on derivatives and all other trades. With $1 million exemption for the little guy. So only millionaires pay. And we'll be back next week. Tarpley.net, Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter. If you have a struggle reality, let us know. If you can do a translation into any of the world's languages, let us know that too. We'll see you next week.